Bro, is it just me or is life just like a little bit too fast moving nowadays? When I was a kid growing up in the summer, being outside all the time or even stuck inside on a rainy day, I feel like my hours passed slowly. And I know that it comes with growing up that time passes more quickly, but I really think that it might be more than that. I think our brains have been trained through the algorithms and through shorts and reels and TikTok to just expect a dopamine hit and to scroll to the next thing. Like, it's trained us to be in a hurry. I feel like sometimes it's really important to slow down and enjoy something that's just like a little bit more relaxing. And I'm sure you're probably thinking, like, this is supposed to be a horror channel, so how could you talk about being relaxing? But I do believe in this thing that I call cozy horror. It's not jump scary, adrenaline inducing, or like holding onto your seat kind of scary. I mean, that's fun, but this is like the kind of thing where you can curl up with a warm drink to enjoy it, or listen to alone and get comfortable, or listen to it on a walk. Spine tingling but not anxiety inducing horror content. Basically the equivalent of telling ghost stories around a campfire. Just all in good fun. So I pulled some Reddit stories from BackwoodsCreepy and I'm just gonna chill on Minecraft. Down the line, I do have my own like creative, scary stories that I've written, and I would love to incorporate them with some immersive sound design while I do this, but that's gonna be a little ways off. That's definitely a passion project and I've already started work on it, so hopefully if this does well, I might end up uploading one of those soon. But for now, it's just gonna be some Reddit stories. And I'm gonna read them real casual like. Our first story is from Lumpy Artichoke 030. Love that name. And it is titled Heard a Whistle Late at Night. Last night, my boyfriend and I were headed home and got a flat tire. This was around midnight and we were in a highway, so we immediately got off at an exit in the middle of nowhere, and he got to changing the tire. It was dark. The only light we had were the headlights and our phones. I was very paranoid and I kept telling my boyfriend that I heard things and I feel weird because it was so lonely. But we shook it off as me just being paranoid. The whole time we were there, I felt so paranoid and anxious, but my boyfriend was trying to calm me down so he could just change the tire and leave. I was on the lookout with my flashlight the whole time. Finally, after 30 minutes of being out there, he was finished with the tire. He told me to put something up in the car, and as soon as I went back to him, he yelled at me to get the fuck in the car, and I immediately went in the car and was just in full panic mode. The whole car was moving from the trunk, and I just heard banging. I kept trying to look back and forth to see where my boyfriend was, and if I saw someone, but honestly, it's such a blur, I can't even remember most of it anymore. Thankfully, my boyfriend immediately comes in the car, and we rush out of there. He proceeds to tell me that he had heard a whistle from a thorn bush in front of us, as if somebody was calling him. He said that he saw jeans and a body figure right behind it, and when he heard the whistle, he immediately picked up the flat tire and was forcing it into the trunk. We were terrified and still are because we were at the location for 30 minutes or so. So I don't know if a person was just staring at us the whole time, but also if there was, why wouldn't they have done something by then? I wish I had looked out when we left to see if there was any movement or if I saw anyone, but we were just in full panic mode and he literally had chills all over his body. My boyfriend did say when he was forcibly closing the trunk he had a crowbar and didn't see anyone come out, but it was fast and a blur. He didn't exactly see anything else. I truly do believe he saw something because he felt like it was a life or death situation. We aren't sure what the whistle was, but we are thankful that nothing happened, and we are definitely never stopping in the middle of nowhere in the night, ever. A friend said that the whistle could have been his guardian angel looking out for him, and the whistle was to tell him to leave immediately. But yeah, this was definitely the scariest experience we've ever had. Okay, wow, there's like a little bit to unpack here. They pulled off on like a random exit in the middle of nowhere. And there's just somebody crouched in a bush, like whistling at them. That is terrifying. Part of me wonders if they were like using the bathroom or something like that, and then they just like were in this weird situation where they had to decide to come out. But I mean, it doesn't seem like that's the situation at all. It seems like somebody was being creepy. There are also just so many legends and myths about if you hear whistling late at night in the woods, and how you're not supposed to respond or get close to it because it's like a trap or something to lure you to your death. It's just a really scary concept. I can't imagine if one of them was alone in this. It's good that there were two of them, so at least if somebody did jump out, it was 2 against 1. But still, they had the element of surprise, whoever was crouching in the bush. That's terrifying. Additionally, the fact that they had been out there, 30 minutes, she said, before they realized that somebody else was with them. It's really good on the boyfriend for having situational awareness and getting his girlfriend in the car as fast as possible and taking off. Also, what if they weren't done changing the tire? That would have been so bad. It sounds like everything kind of wrapped up at the right time. This next story airs a little more on the supernatural side. And whether or not we believe these stories, that is not what we are discussing. We are here for a good story. We are going to suspend belief and enjoy it. So this one is by ___ Anita with a 1 for the I, and it is called Roadside Echoes in Northeastern Wisconsin. This story takes place a few years ago, when I lived in a rural farming community on the Lake Michigan shoreline. Sometimes when I'm having trouble sleeping, I like to drive around for a little while because it helps relax me. One such night, around 3 a.m. or so, I was driving down an extremely narrow, rutted road, lined with heavy trees and deep, deep ditches on either side. The trees formed a sort of canopy over the cracked and bucked pavement. The lights of my Y2K Ford Taurus were the brightest thing out there, and that certainly isn't saying much. Such roads were common in that area, and to tell you the truth, I loved them for the privacy and the ambience that they provided. I didn't think too much of it beyond, it's a little spooky out here, and just kept driving, scanning the deep, deep ditches for deer and looking for interesting things like abandoned houses and barns. I crested a slight rise and saw something alongside the road, but it wasn't a deer. Slowly coming up on it, I saw what appeared to be a human figure with no lower half. It was basically just a torso, dragging itself out of the ditch on the right-hand side and then vanished completely. I immediately conducted what my sister likes to refer to as a 75-point turn to get out of there on that narrow, narrow road. I didn't sleep when I got home. A few hours later at work, I told my boss about what I had seen. He was a farmer on the volunteer fire department and usually just smiled indulgently when I would come to him with something like that. Frankly, I think the man thought I had a screw loose. Not this time. He paused after I had finished telling my story, looking at me in an odd, squinting way. He asked me to describe what road I was on, or at least the general area. He had a road map of every back road in the country in his head, so I did my best to explain where I was approximately. Finally, he looked at me in a troubled way and told me that when he was a teenager in the late 80s or early 90s, his dad, who was also a volunteer firefighter, responded to a crash in that area. A local farmer had rolled his tractor down in one of those deep ditches and was crushed to death on his way home from late-night field work. As an aside, the entire family of that poor dead farmer is whispered to have been cursed by many in the community, but that's a story for another post. My mouth went dry, and my boss, who usually doesn't believe in that kind of stuff, told me he did in fact believe me. I never drove on that road again, and I probably couldn't find it again even if I went back and tried. But whenever I drive at night, I think of what I saw in the echo of a long dead man in my headlights. I don't drive around like that so much anymore. This one actually gave me chills. I think a lot of us that have lived out in the country, especially, can relate to driving through those roads at night. You constantly have to be scanning for deer or animals or anything, not only because you don't want to harm the animal, but because if they jump out, they could total your car. So your eyes are just peeled, looking on each side of the road. So to see something that is not only not an animal, but appears to be human with no lower half is absolutely horrifying to think about, especially out in the middle of nowhere where there's usually no street lights or anything. It's very eerie on a good day. You'll see something or hear something mysterious any day of the week out in the middle of nature, but to see something like that, I would probably be terrified to ever drive again. This next story was written by philosopher_512. Unsettling camping experience. And just as a teaser for you, there is a comment on this post that I will read after the fact that actually gave me the spine tingles. So I'll just go ahead and read the story first. Alright, so I've decided to share this story in case anyone has had a similar experience. In the summer of 2023, I was camping with my family in Beaver Creek Campground in Montana for a few nights while visiting Yellowstone. The first night, there was the most unsettling experience I have ever had. My mother, stepfather, and his brother had all gone to sleep around midnight while I stayed up for about an hour by the fire. It was pitch black when I decided to snuff the fire and head to my tent to sleep. After about 20 minutes laying in my own tent, I began to hear sniffing noises immediately outside my tent. Fearing it was a bear, I was frozen. This continued for a while until I heard the familiar breathing and shaking noises of that of a dog. I relaxed, supposing a nearby camper's dog had wandered. I stopped hearing the dog after a while, but then I heard footsteps walking around our campsite and the sound of a large stick being dragged along the ground all around. Then I was frozen in fear again at the possibility of a stranger walking around our campsite in pitch darkness. Suddenly, an obvious camera flash had gone off right in front of my tent. I was frozen solid in fear. Later, it felt as though an animal or person had laid down and cradled the corner of my tent. I felt a presence for about 5 minutes, and kept feeling it as if someone was lightly fidgeting with the corners of the tent. Still frozen, I prayed for this to stop. But then I was forced to make this person, or whatever, acknowledge my awareness of the situation when I sensed another's touch of the zipper on my tent door. I called out loudly, "Who's there?" My stepdad awoke and called out to me while I was too afraid to open my door. 10 seconds passed. When I knew he was out of his tent with his gun, I emerged. However, there was nothing there, and after I called out, I didn't hear or sense any movement going away from the campsite. All while my mom and stepdad have a dog on their tent, which reacted to nothing the entire time. I slept in the car the next 2 nights, and nothing else happened. Anyone have any weird encounters like this in Montana near Yellowstone or in general? Thank you for reading my story. Alright, so this one kind of automatically plays into everyone's worst fear while camping, that an animal or someone is going to walk through your campsite and you have no real way to keep them out. Tents are flimsy, people can cut into them, they can just unzip it. It is a very scary possibility, and it's really important to pick your campsites safely. But in parks like this, like around the Yellowstone area, the population is extremely sparse. I mean, you can have a ton of people camping there and maybe not even run into them. So they didn't necessarily make a bad call on where to camp. This is just a really scary experience. Now, what really got me was when I went into the comments because they asked if anybody else had experienced something similar. And somebody actually mentioned they were a Montana local. It was fun_sandwich 8012. They wrote, "Yikes, I live in Montana and a man was arrested for homicide near where you camped semi-recently. He walked up on a man in his tent and chopped him to death with a machete or cleaver. He stole the man's truck and took off. They caught him later, but he gave no reason for his crime. Just a creep creeping around in the woods." Holy shit. There's people out there that have no motivation for murder other than just to do it, and they're in the most sparse locations you've ever heard of, just wandering around. That's terrifying. Now, we don't actually know if this is what the poster experienced, but it's enough to make you think twice about camping alone or in a group or how you're going to set up for security. And just to think how lucky she was that she wasn't sleeping when this incident occurred. So this last story is by Channel 13 Outdoors, and it's titled "Heard Crying While Turkey Hunting." I've hunted turkeys for years, mostly in Oklahoma in spots local to me. I'm an Okie born and raised. Anyway, this happened a while back when I was a young man, right at the start of turkey season in a spot I got permission to hunt. I pulled up way before daylight, parked off a dirt road, and walked into the woods. If you know turkey hunting, it's a game of patience. Get set up, get quiet, start calling, and wait. I set my decoys out in a little clearing and tucked myself back against a big old oak tree. Morning mist was clinging to everything. real thick that day, kinda eerie and a little out of the ordinary for the place that I was hunting. Once it was time, I did a few soft yelps on my call, just trying to coax a long beard in. Not 5 minutes later, I heard a distant gobble. Adrenaline kicked in. Then, right after that, I heard something else. Crying. Like, human crying. Faint, but enough to stop me dead. At first, I thought it had to be a weird bird I had never heard, or maybe a coyote making a racket. I've heard coyotes make some freaky noises when they get riled up, so I shook it off and kept hunting. But then it came again, clearer this time. It wasn't an animal. It was human. Sounded like a baby or really small kid, crying somewhere behind me in the trees. At that point, I was concerned. I figured maybe someone's kid had wandered off from one of the homes around there or something. You never know. It did sort of scare me, but I was more worried that a kid was in the woods alone and by themselves. I have nieces, nephews, and younger cousins, so it stirred something in me. I got my gun and started picking my way through the brush, following the sound. I kinda had to fight my way through a briar patch and some cedars, which isn't ever fun, but it is definitely crying that I was hearing. I finally came to an old oak tree. It was twisted all up, old as hell, looked like it had been struck by lightning at some point. There was a hollow near the base, big enough to crawl into if you wanted. The crying sounded like it was coming from inside that hollow. I just stood there, heart pounding, trying to see anything in the dark hole. I was honestly trying to work up the courage to look inside, but before I could even take a step closer, the crying stopped, like someone had flipped a switch. Dead silence. I backed up, real slow. Didn't turn my back until I got some distance between me and that tree. I started to call my dad, but the whole thing left me feeling crazy. I felt like I had imagined it, but I know what I heard. I grabbed my gear and hiked out fast. Didn't even hunt the rest of the day. A month or two later, I was talking to a buddy of mine at his house. We were getting ready to go fishing, and his uncle was out there holding court around the tailgate of his truck. We got to talking, and I told him about it, and he got real quiet. He's full-blood Seminole. I'm not sure how familiar you folks are with the Oklahoma's history, but the Seminoles were one of the tribes that were sent here in the 1800s. And I was hunting some land that would have been theirs and in an area that they would have settled in. Anyways, he explained quietly, almost reverently, that the Seminole people traditionally buried stillborn babies in the hollows of trees, believing the trees protected the tiny souls until they could pass on peacefully. I still get chills thinking about it. I don't think what I heard was trying to scare me. I think it just was. Like an old sadness still hanging around. When I'm in the woods, I still think of that tree sometimes, and the tiny voice held gently within. It reminds me that even places we believe we know intimately can hold mysteries beyond our understanding, and that not every unexplained sound in the wild is meant to harm us. I've thought about it a lot, and the best I can come up with is that some things are simply meant to be remembered, respected, and left in peace. That one was a lot. That one probably creeped me out the most, but I think it had the most interesting lore behind it, for sure. Also, I'm sorry if I sound stuffy. It's because I am. I am getting over a cold that doesn't seem to want to leave me alone. I've been better technically for a week, and my nose has no idea that it's supposed to be functioning like the rest of my body. Nevertheless, if you listened this far, as usual, I appreciate you bunches. I really want to do this again. I quite enjoy it. And like I said, maybe I'll incorporate some of my own horror writing into it sometime. Alright guys, stay safe, stay healthy, unlike me. I'm not gonna say stay out of the woods. I am just gonna say maybe bring a buddy, because safety in numbers, or if you run faster than them, it's not a problem. Sacrifices will be made.